In the next couple of days, you'll hear everyone talking about the 15th anniversary of the Iraq War. You know, that time in 2003 when the US and its allies lied about weapons of mass destruction, invaded a country, disbanded its army and state institutions, leading to the spread of sectarianism, Daesh, a civil war, displacement, poverty, and strife. Yes, that invasion. But what if I told you it hasn't been 15 years since the US and its allies committed war crimes in Iraq? It hasn't been 15 years since the US used military force that consequently destroyed what was once a modernized, industrial, and prosperous nation. It's been more like 30 years, and here's how it all went down. The story starts on July 25th, 1990. Iraq's then leader Saddam Hussein met with US Ambassador Gillespie to discuss the possibility of Iraq invading its neighbor Kuwait. Saddam made it clear that Iraq could not find a peaceful solution with Kuwait, and that an Iraqi invasion was imminent. At some point during the conversation, Saddam asked Gillespie, "What is the United States' opinion on this?" To which Gillespie responded, "We have no opinion on your Arab-Arab conflicts, such as your dispute with Kuwait. Secretary Baker has directed me to emphasize the instruction first given to Iraq in the 1960s that the Kuwait issue is not associated with America." Shortly after the meeting with the US ambassador, Saddam ordered the invasion of Kuwait, claiming that it was Iraq's 19th province, an imaginary country carved out by colonial powers. He also accused Kuwait of stealing Iraqi oil from the Al-Rumayla well. But unlike the US ambassador had hinted, by November 1990, the UN Security Council had authorized the use of all necessary means of force against Iraq if it did not withdraw from Kuwait by January 15th, 1991. The UN's decision was supported by the US under President George Bush, his allies, and a majority of Arab countries. But here's what people forgot. The Iraqi government reached an agreement mediated by the former Soviet Union for a ceasefire and retreat from Kuwait. And so on February 25th, 1991, Iraqi forces started retreating from Kuwait via a highway leading to the city of Basra in southern Iraq. Now, White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater promised that the US and its coalition partners would not attack Iraqi forces leaving Kuwait. But on the ground, the US chose to ignore the white flag and instead trapped more than 2,000 military vehicles and tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers traveling in plain sight, and then proceeded to carpet bomb the whole area, killing thousands of retreating soldiers. Time magazine described the image as mile after mile of burnt, smashed, shattered vehicles of every description. The Los Angeles Times said that, quote, "On the 60 miles of coastal highway, Iraqi military units sit in gruesome repose. Scorched skeletons of vehicles and men alike, black and awful under the sun." US soldiers themselves commented on the gruesomeness of the scene. Major Bob Nugent, an army intelligence officer, said that, quote, "Even in Vietnam, I didn't see anything like this. It's pathetic." So a war crime was committed, but no one calls it that, because it went by unpunished and so was largely forgotten. After the Gulf War ended, the US and UK used their influence in the UN Security Council to maintain and harshen the economic sanctions placed on Iraq in 1990. The sanctions were aimed at putting pressure on Saddam Hussein and his military. But instead, they created a humanitarian crisis. One that the Iraqi people paid the price for rather than their leaders. A lack of healthcare, nutrition, and a collapsing economy became a recipe for disaster. Now, the UN tried to address the crisis by launching the Oil for Food program in 1997. The program did help somewhat with the crisis, but was marred by allegations of corruption and misappropriation of funds. Meanwhile, the misery at home triggered dissent against Saddam, and he responded using tyrannical measures to suppress any form of opposition, killing more than 30,000 people and locking up thousands more. Despite some world powers calling for the end of sanctions, the US and UK kept them in force, leaving Iraq in a state of despair for more than a decade. Then came 2002, and once again, it was similar characters taking center stage. Bush's son, George W. Bush, restarted the beef with Saddam Hussein. This time, the premise was weapons of mass destruction. A UN Council Resolution 1441 offered Iraq a final opportunity to comply with its disarmament obligations. The UN inspectors, led by this guy, Baradei, went to Iraq and didn't find what they were looking for. But Bush and British Prime Minister Tony Blair had already taken their decision. They pursued military action without UN approval and issued an ultimatum on March 17, 2003, demanding that Saddam Hussein step down from power and leave Iraq within 48 hours under threat of war. Saddam Hussein refused, and in 21 days the US had taken control of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. No weapons of mass destruction were found, no viable solution for a post-Saddam Iraq was reached, and more war crimes were committed by the US and its allies. Saddam Hussein was punished and hanged on Eid Day, the most holy day for Muslims, while Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Tony Blair, and all their coalition allies are yet to be charged for any of their crimes. And the last 15 years has been a history of bloodied screens playing out in front of us on a daily basis. So March 20th, 2018 isn't only the anniversary of the Iraq War, this is the anniversary of the most powerful country in the world declaring an illegal war that created even more anarchy and chaos in a country already suffering from a humanitarian crisis. And today, as plans are set in motion for the reconstruction of Iraq, the main perpetrators like the US and UK are all reluctant to pledge money to rebuild the country that they helped raise to the ground. So will justice ever be served? Will Iraq ever return to the center of culture, science and industry it once was? Will the US and its allies help rebuild the futures which they helped destroy? Will the media, international community and leaders involved admit to their misdeeds? Will history remember this at the convenience of the victors? Or will we this time record it with a lot more introspection? Who will eventually answer to the Iraqi people?